Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Communicating Your Sustainability Story. I'm Claire Waters. I'm just going to give everybody a few minutes to join in the session. But while I do, I'll tell you just a bit about IIE. So Investors in the Environment, for those of you that don't already know, is a national environmental accreditation scheme. So we work with a lot of different businesses, from very small to much, much larger, to support them to put environmental management systems in place and to reduce their impact on the environment in a variety of different ways, which is really tailored to our business needs. But some common themes are reducing waste, reducing carbon footprint, etc. So we also provide accreditation services to IIE standards. We've got 3 different accreditation levels: bronze, silver, and then our highest current accreditation of green. And that can be part of a sustainability story and part of kind of evidencing that not only are they doing this stuff, but also, you know, they're getting that external verification, so that it's not just greenwash, it's reality. So to tell you a little bit about myself and also Nairi, our speaker today. Thank you so much for being with us today, Nairi. So I'm Claire Waters. I'm a sustainability consultant for Investors in the Environment. I've been working for IIE for just over a year now, but I've been doing similar roles for somewhere around 10 years now. So I've worked with a lot of different organisations in my time. Communicating the sustainability story is something that we talk about with our members a fair amount, mainly because, you know, right at the start of their journey with us, one of the reasons that they want to join IIE and have that accreditation is because a lot of businesses are being pushed by clients and also staff. You know, their staff want them to be doing the right thing. So they want to meet those kind of wants and demands by putting this system in place. So communicating the story of, okay, not only are we just doing this, but also we're telling people about it to make sure they know that their needs and wants are being met, is kind of integral to the IIE process. But Nairi is much more specialised in her knowledge and support. She's been doing this for a number of years. I'll let her introduce herself properly in a minute. But just to say, Nairi has suggested that as we go through the presentation, if you do have any questions, please do pop them up in chat, and I will stop Nairi at the end of her slide and ask the question as we go through. If there's questions that seem more relevant to ask at the end, we will also have a Q&A session at the end. So now I'm going to hand over to Nairi. Nairi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to try and share my screen. And go back to the beginning. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, as Claire said, I'm Nairi. I've been working in sustainability, communications and behaviour change for about almost 20 years now. And Claire and I actually worked together right at the beginning of our careers when we knew nothing. And we were just saying how well we've both aged. So it's a nice start to the morning. So just a tiny bit about me. In April 2020, just as lockdown was starting, I co-founded Jack and Grace, a communications agency, and we believe that communications is a superpower, and therefore it should really only be used for the power of good. And with that in mind, we only work with organisations that have kind of social purpose at the heart, so they value people and planet equally with profit. And we've been on this journey of what we've called unnormaling, but it's basically kind of questioning all those traditional norms in office working life. For example, to us, flexible working is normal. Having set office hours is weird. We don't see gaps in CVs, we just see rich experience when people have had time to do caring or parenting. So we're trying to kind of unpick all of those slightly out of date norms in everything that we do. And then some of our clients. So it's just over a year in now, and it's going all right. Thank you to those of you who filled in the little survey monkey that we sent out, much appreciated, and also to the guinea pigs who very kindly let me have a little nose around their digital shopfront, their social media and their websites. I'll come on to those later, but just a quick note on who are you. So basically I've got an impossible job today because you're all so different, from councils to kind of product manufacturing, engineering, architecture, a practicing vet. It's really, really broad in terms of the organisations and the roles that you're doing. But actually, when we looked at the answers you gave to why you're here today and the kind of problems you're facing, there was a lot of similarity, which is a relief. So a lot of it was around driving interest and engagement, both internal and external. Wanting to do it better, so wanting to communicate your sustainability story better in a punchier way, in a way that gives you more stand out from the crowd, in a way that feels a bit more sort of stick of rock integrated into what you're doing rather than a sort of add-on on the side. And some of you were really honest, which I love, and you're not really sure why you're here, but you've just starting out or you've just joined IIE and you just feel like you want to absorb some of this stuff. All of those are good answers. So with that in mind, I'm going to focus today on the strategic side of communications rather than the tactical side. So the strategic side, that makes it sound really fancy, but it's basically the thought that goes into your communications before you go about pressing post on a social media feed or sending out a press release. So it's the kind of thinking bit beforehand. And once you've got that thinking bit right, it makes the other stuff much, much easier. When you actually do go out with stuff. Luckily, that also ties in perfectly to my brief, which is to tell your green story with impact, figure out what's worth sharing, what isn't, and practical tips to cut through the noise. Before we start, we had one very specific question that I just want to tick off, which was around how you link social media accounts so that posts get automatically shared. So you write one, you post it on one platform and it posts across all of them. And I just thought I'd tick that off because it's a really easy one. I'm here to tell you, don't do that. It feels like a really good way on paper to save time, but it actually wastes your time, and worst, it wastes that of your audience, because each of these social media platforms and each of the platforms that you use work differently, reach a different audience, or if you're using them properly, they should be reaching a different audience. So your message would need to be slightly different. So please never link your social media and do it in one go. I know it seems like a good use of efficiency, but it isn't. So where to start? I thought we'd have a look at how some other people do it, some kind of recognisable brands do it, and just pick through those a little bit. I suppose the first thing to say about that is that there is no right way of communicating your sustainability story. There's just a way that works best for you, for your brand, for your organisation. So IKEA, their approach to communicating sustainability until very recently was not to. So they had a policy that they would not really talk about it, just get on and behind the scenes do it. And that changed fairly recently with their campaign, Fortune Favours the Frugal, which ties back to their expansion around their circular economy. And that's a kind of recent step change for them. But IKEA has always welcomed kind of criticism, seen it as an opportunity to improve, addressed it head on. And their early days around this, around 20 years ago, was focused on doing no bad. So trying to limit their impact so that they were not actively doing bad. But they've moved. So I've just noticed my Teams keeps popping up. Sorry if that's a little bit distracting. So recently they have taken the decision to move from not bad to net good. So that means they don't want to just make no bad stuff happen as a byproduct of what they're doing. They don't want to be neutral. They actually want to have a positive impact. And this is really hard for IKEA. And this advert around Fortune favours the frugal went out a couple of months after their Christmas ad, which was all about, is your home looking drab and dreary? Perhaps you could just buy loads of new stuff and replace it all. So I think this is a really tricky juxtaposition for IKEA to get their heads around, actually. I'm actually just gonna, that's really annoying me and it's probably annoying you. Let me just turn it off. Whew. Hate Teams. Okay, we're going back. Okay. So that's IKEA. Who gives a crap? So this brand, you've probably come across them. It's toilet roll. Who knew that there was room to innovate loo roll? But who gives a crap have just proved that it's possible. So the way that they communicate their sustainability story is really, really loudly as possible, in a very fun, bold, disruptive way. From everything about their brand to the way that they communicate, the way that they wrap their products, it runs through everything. And for them, because they're a purpose-driven organisation, i.e. they exist with purpose at their core, it runs through very naturally, it runs through absolutely everything that they do. The sustainability story is very much at the heart of what they do, and was built in from the very, very beginning. So it feels very authentic and is a core part of their brand. For Riverford, so this is one of our clients, and they're the Vegbox people, organic Vegbox people. For Riverford, their guiding star has been around being regenerative. So very much that net good outcome. It's not that they want to limit the damage they're doing or reduce their impact on the world. They want to leave the world in a better state than they found it. And the company's founded on these principles, and that follows through with everything that they do when they communicate their sustainability story. So it's very careful how they communicate. It's slow, it's steady, it's very thorough, it's always well researched, and it's absolutely uncompromising. Everything is backed up with evidence, and that sometimes slows them down and means that they miss a trend or miss a trick. But it's what means their audience completely trust them, because they're slow and steady, but every statement and claim is kind of backed up. They're never vague. They'll always point you towards more information or this thorough piece of research that they've done. And then there's Iceland, which is a really unlikely sustainability hero, and it is not always an easy fit for Iceland by any means, but they're trying, and they keep trying. And they communicate their sustainability story, I think it's fair to say, with difficulty and with a lot of trials. So they were the first supermarket to introduce 100% organic fruit and veg. And it didn't work. And they were aware that it might be tricky, and they had set aside budget to take a hit if sales reduced. But sales reduced to such an extent that they felt they needed to do a U-turn on it. So they're always trying, always willing to take risks up to a point, and they'll keep doing it, but it's not necessarily always an easy fit for their audience or for what they're trying to do, but they're committed to it, and I think good on them. So I want to talk to you about some kind of key principles, and then I'm going to talk about our brave guinea pigs who have let me kind of dig around what they've been doing, and we can have a little look at them. So the first principle, and this one I know it sounds so obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people start communicating before they've actually thought about what they're really trying to do and why. And this is where any effective communication, whether it's about your sustainability or not, needs to start. Never just talk for the sake of it. Don't be that person at the party that when you meet them, they just tell you everything about themselves that you didn't want to know. It's about having a conversation and being really thoughtful about what you say. So start by thinking, what is it you're actually trying to achieve by communicating your sustainability efforts? Why does it matter for the organisation, for the business? Is it about getting more people involved? Is it because you have to do it because that's what your audience wants to hear? Is it because it gives you a market edge, or it could give you a market edge? And by being really clear on this, it will help you define what it is you want to say, and also what isn't worth saying right now, and perhaps what you keep in your back pocket. Again, going back to that party example, you don't want to be that person who just tells you everything at once. It needs to be a conversation. So in terms of making this real, it's about setting out a really clear objective, and always start with the business objective. What is the business objective that the communications objective will help you achieve? So if that is more sales, you can then work the kind of comms objective around that. And these will turn into your key messages, which you should have maybe 3 plus a call to action, just to keep it really realistic and doable. So your kind of why are we doing this? What exactly are we trying to do will become your key messages. And do your thinking about how you're going to know whether or not you've been successful upfront. So there are some marketers on the call who will be falling asleep at the moment because this is just bread and butter. But I know we've got a breadth of people here, so hopefully that some of this is useful. But starting to think upfront about what will it look like when this is done? What does success look like here? Being clear on that upfront so that you can make sure you measure that kind of impact later on. You can figure out what the right measurement is. The second one is do you know your audience? Do you know who you need to reach with this sustainability message? You've thought about why you want to communicate it, but do you know who needs to hear it? Where do they get their information? How are you going to reach them? Who is it that they trust? Is it you, or is it somebody else that would be better placed delivering this message? And also, what is that audience group's starting point? And it is really important to recognize that your audience is where they are, not where you want them to be. So you need to make sure you understand what their starting point is. And by that, I mean, you might wish that your team of staff or the group of members of the public that you're trying to reach understood sustainability in a way that you understand it. But that's not the reality. Even if you might like to get them to that point, it's not the reality now. And a good example of this is just Riverford's approach to communicating sustainability works really well for them. They've got a very, very clear idea on who it is who's going to buy their produce. Riverford could not communicate effectively to Iceland customers because they're a completely different group of people and their starting point is completely different. So you have to be really clear on why it is you want to communicate sustainability and who it is that you need to hear that message, and your starting point has to be with where they are and understanding their context. What else is going on in their lives? Are they very busy? You know, in what way is this message going to land? And I think that's particularly important with kind of emerging from lockdown and everything that the pandemic has left behind. What is the context that your messages are landing in is really important. This is a tool. I just wanted to show you this, and I know these slides will be available later, but we created this for a client, just a really top line way of getting a grip on who your audience is. And this was one slide of 5. So we had 5 different kind of slightly different segments of audience. And this was just a really quick way of setting out who are they, what matters to them, what's going to land with them, where are they hanging out, what are they reading, where do they get their kind of information from, and who are the people that they respond to, which influencers, which types of people. And that's not to say that we would then go and get Joe Wicks to do a campaign, because he's really expensive. But it might be that we talk in a similar way that he does to kind of capture that same energy and make sure that the message resonates. So this is a really specific example, but it's quite a nice format to use if you're trying to get under the skin of your audience a little bit. And this is another tool that it might be useful for you to have. So very much thinking about what it is that you want to say, why you want to say it, and what it is you want to get across, and what it is your audience is ready and able to hear at this point in time. Because the skill in communications isn't just kind of saying stuff, it's saying stuff that's going to land with impact and get people to take an action. And actually the crossover of what you want to say, what people are ready, able, want to hear is quite small, and it's finding that kind of sweet spot in the middle, which combines those two things, which is why it's really important you don't try and say everything at once. The next principle that I wanted to touch on was just bringing it to life. And this is summed up for me really nicely in the current focus on plastics, largely driven by the images we've been seeing of sea life kind of tangled with plastic. And I think, like the kind of that vision of the hedgehog stuck in the Cannes ring pool that we used to have probably in the 80s, I think. It's those images that really bring it to life for people. So it's thinking about, you've thought about why you want to communicate, and you're really clear on your objective. You know who you need to say it to, and you understand them inside and out. And you're clear on what you want to say, but it's then how do you land that message in a way that is going to be meaningful for that audience, and how you kind of bring it to life. So it's very much about kind of telling stories, using imagery to bring stuff to life, using language that will resonate with your audience. And again, that's where going back to your audience is really important. Being open, honest, and vulnerable. And I think this is really important. We sometimes feel as sustainability people that we have to be better than everybody else in order to have a right to say stuff. And that is not the case. I think you have to be transparent, and you have to be open and honest about where you're trying to do better, and that it is a journey. It will never really be done. But being honest about that, I think, is a way that makes more people feel like they can take steps too, because you're not kind of setting yourselves out as some kind of Olympian. All of this is doable. It's a journey we're all on. Tying into kind of bigger hooks and dates and issues is a really good way to just jump on the back of things, get your content noticed, gives you a reason to post. And that could be a date, like it could be an awareness date, for example, or it could equally be an issue. Somebody started a petition that you feel particularly passionate about. It's fine to kind of jump on the back of those things as well. And the most important thing of all in terms of bringing it to life is about showing people rather than telling people. And I think it's really important to be clear on what is your message and what's your kind of narrative, what's the story you're telling around this, and what is just evidence that backs up what you're saying. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but being clear on that distinction is important. Hello, Claire.
I just wanted to let you know we've got a question, and I thought it was quite a good one for you to address now. I'm just going to read it out. It's from an anonymous attendee, which is absolutely fine. If people want to ask questions anonymously, please do. It says, "Hi Nairi, we've just started on our journey. How can we communicate that we are at the start of our journey internally? We are ambitious, but are aware that the steps might need to be incremental at first. Our staff survey showed that we have a real mix of buy-in for our eco initiatives."
Could you say that last bit again, the survey?
Yeah, hang on a second. Just minimise that. Our staff survey showed that we have a real mix of buy-in for our eco initiatives.
Brilliant. Such a great question. So if you're at the start of your journey and you've got very, very different audience groups to take with you, the most important thing is to be really clear yourselves on what you're setting out as your vision, where you want to get to, and also what is acceptable and unacceptable within that. What I mean by that is you've got a mix of kind of buy-in, but presumably you're committed to this. You're not going to be saying, guys, we've started this, you can opt in or you can opt out. You're saying this is the direction of travel, this is the way that we're going together, and you're being really clear on that. So I think understanding where your audience is coming from is really helpful for you. But for internal communications, you are indicating a kind of strategic direction of travel, and you've got to take everybody with you, but you do that by pointing out that this is the direction you're going in. I think the urge sometimes when you're starting out is to start out by creating, well, you'll be creating plans and policies and stuff. You have to have all of that kind of really important, robust stuff. And I know that's what IIE helps you get in place. It gives you that kind of framework and structure. But I wouldn't start with sharing all of that detail. I would start by sharing the story and going back to why this is really important for the company, why this matters to the organisation, where it's come from, and start there and be really open and honest about the fact that this is a starting point. Stuff will change over the coming years, months and years, and people will start to see stuff coming through. But I think the instinct is always to say, right, we need to get people on board. We're going to start removing bins and replacing them with recycled bins. We're going to start getting people to travel more sustainably. And I think the most important thing up front is to start with a story rather than starting with stuff. There's this famous saying by a guy called Simon Sinek who says that people buy why you do something. They don't buy what you do, and they don't buy how you do it. They buy why. So I think always starting with the why is the most powerful way of doing it. It's a really interesting question. Hopefully that's some helpful stuff in there. Back it up. So this is the next kind of principle that I wanted to talk you through. This is the one where you avoid greenwash at all costs, because there was a time when you could get away with it, and that time has long passed. So it is very much, when you're communicating sustainability, it is about being transparent. It's about recognizing that this is what you've managed and you know there's more work to do, and that's okay, and this is what you're going to do about it. It's about showing your workings, everything that sits behind, and being as open as you can with that, I think, and backing everything up with evidence. Again, this is where your kind of IIE accreditation comes in, because it kind of forces your hand. You will have all that really rich data. What I would say in terms of backing it up is that remember that this is your evidence. This is what we would call your proof points. They're often a little bit dull. They're really, really important. Dull stuff is often the most important, but it isn't necessarily what is going to resonate with your audience. There might be exceptions to that, so you have to know your audience, but generally they're the kind of backing singers rather than the main event. You'd always need them there. They're the strong foundation that they give you your right to make any claim in this space, but they're probably not a message in their own right. I always shy away slightly from the sort of branded images you see where it says we've saved 4,000 tons of carbon, but without any wider context. You know, that's just a number. It doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't give me any sense of why this matters to you as an organisation and the journey that you're going on. It's just a random number. So I would have that evidence there, but it's how you kind of present that matters in terms of the story that you are telling. And I think because we get really excited about the evidence, the proof points, this much paper saved, this much energy saved, we get really excited about that, and we forget to actually communicate the bigger story, which is what we as humans buy into. We like stories. I would say in this slide, and we'll kind of come on to this when we look at the guinea pigs, where I've had a look at what they've been doing. But making the most of your IIE accreditation is so key for this kind of section, because it's that external validation for your claims. It's an external body saying that, yeah, you've done what you need to get this level. It's not just you saying it, and it kind of forces you. So I think when you're kind of communicating your sustainability story, if you're not using your IIE accreditation to kind of as that external validation, then you're missing a trick. This is another tool that might be familiar to some of you, but it's something that we use quite often for clients, just to help you organise all of that stuff. Because I know I've just said loads and loads of stuff, but this is a way of kind of organising some of that. So the kind of the roof, it's a message house is what it's called. The roof is where you set out your kind of your one-line proposition, the change you want to see. And this ties very strongly back to your business objective and your communications objectives that you thought about right at the beginning. And then your messages will be developed very much with what you want to get across and what your audience is able to hear in mind. So those become the kind of pillars of the house. And these will be, it's usually 3 key messages and a sort of call to action. And then underneath them, the foundations of the house are the evidence, your proof points. And they usually come under each message. So if your message was around, I don't know, the vision for the next 3 years is X, you would then have your proof points underneath to say, this is how far we've come, this is the numbers, this is everything you need to see so that we can make that kind of claim. Or if you want, your message was, we are going to be the most carbon efficient law firm in the country. Okay, that's a big claim, that's a really nice claim, where's your proof? So that would all sit under it. So it's just another tool that you can kind of help organise your thoughts around this. Another core principle of this is around making your sustainability communications like a stick of rock that runs through everything you're doing, rather than being a sort of add-on. But this is really hard to do unless sustainability really is core to your organisation. If it is an add-on, there are ways that you can kind of weave it in so that it's not sort of why have I picked a word that I don't know how to say? It's not sitting over here on its own, siloed on its own. There are things that you can do to kind of weave it in more. So an example of that would be, don't wait until it's Save the Trees Day to kind of post on Save the Trees Day, but post more regularly about kind of what you're doing and what your vision is. If you're not a kind of purpose-driven organisation, it can be quite difficult to make it feel like a stick of rock. If you are purpose-driven, there is absolutely no excuse that it shouldn't run through absolutely everything you do and kind of be at the core of what you're doing. But either way, it should be a kind of core part of your messaging rather than something that you push at certain times. There's a really good book actually by John Grant, who was a speaker at the IIE conference. Some of you might have been there. If you want to kind of think more about this, Claire's appeared, so that means there's a question. Shall I finish this slide and then go for it? So he was talking a lot about this trend now that in the same way that IKEA have approached it, it's no longer about doing no bad, it's about actively doing good. And there's a lot more on that kind of thing in his book, which I would highly recommend. So if you're purpose driven and this stuff runs through like a stick of rock, you should be communicating like that. If it's something that's important to you, but it's not right at the core of your business, could it be? Is it something that could be more core? We'll come on to talk about this in a little while, but I've got a challenge for Roythorns because they're doing a lot, and I think that they could take it a step further and be a little bit bolder on their kind of vision. If not, if this is because you're doing this because you need to, there's still ways that you can make it feel less like an add-on by posting more regularly and not waiting for a set occasion and making it a core part of your messaging.
Right, I'm going to read this one out again. So, anonymous attendee asks, there is a lot of noise out there in the space around net zero, and I would add to that also things like carbon neutral, etc. All of those sort of slightly different phrases, but essentially driving at the same thing. We aim at figuring this out, and with IIE's help, we feel like we have the beginnings of a path. But do you have any top tips for external comms on how we are aiming to significantly reduce our carbon footprint? And also, he or she says, where have you seen this done well?
it's not often done well, because it's really hard. Depending on who your audience is, it's really hard to talk about net zero and carbon, because it just doesn't mean that much. Where it's done well, it's made relatable to everyday life. So I actually like the way that Living Streets, which is a charity encouraging people to walk more, do it. They used to talk a lot about carbon savings, and they flipped that completely, and they don't talk at all about that now, because generally people, for the general public, it's just too vague a concept, and net zero and Paris aligned, and it's just a step too far. What does it mean to me? And the way that Living Streets did it is to flip it entirely and make it about pollution-free walks. So particularly for parents, that's really important. You know, what their children are kind of breathing in is really, really important. So they flipped it to make it about the individual they were trying to communicate with. I think organisations, when they're talking about carbon footprint, and when they've made real gains in reducing their carbon footprint, they really want to shout about it. But often it's done quite mindlessly, sounds really harsh, but without thought. They actually just want to say it because they're really proud of it and they want to do it. There isn't a kind of strategic reason behind that. And I would urge you to unpick a little bit why you want to communicate that externally. Yes, have it displayed somewhere because it's proof point, but is it anything more than proof point? It's definitely not a story. If you unpick it a bit more, maybe you'll find the story that would actually resonate with people. What does it mean for them? I'm talking slightly blind because I don't know who your audience is, but actually it doesn't matter. It's always your starting point. It has to be them. What is it that will make sense to them? And for most of us, has somebody said what their audience is?
No, I was just going to add to what you're saying slightly.
Do it.
I was just going to say that we try to aim to make it's you know, there's a lot of organisations out there that will calculate your carbon footprint. And I did a carbon footprinting webinar recently, and at the end of the session, what I said was, calculating your carbon footprint it means nothing in terms of reducing your environmental impact. It's just a number, and for most people, it's not even a number that has any context if they're not a specific sustainability professional. So what we encourage at IIE is our carbon calculator. It shows the previous year as well as the current year, so that it's not just a number, it's how are we doing in relation to where we were last year. We also encourage people to do that every year, so they'll have a baseline carbon footprint and then they're working towards, you know, reducing that overall. And they're also, the other thing that's important is to note that often at the start of somebody's journey, they might be looking at their carbon footprint in the context of only perhaps scope 1 and 2 emissions, which are very direct emissions associated with their business. But as they progress, they may actually choose to bring in more impacts that feed into that carbon footprint. So actually their carbon footprint increases, but it's because they've widened the scope. So that's why it's really important to have the narrative around it, and perhaps that's more detailed than it needs to be for I mean, you're the expert, you can let us know. That's probably more detailed than most people need to know, but I do encourage people not only to calculate their carbon footprint, but make sure that they have an understanding themselves and also communicate more externally or internally within the company, whatever it is, to make sure people understand what does this number mean, and what does it mean as part, you know, within the context of that overall journey. Hopefully that was some helpful.
That was really useful. Yeah, I think that was really useful. Yeah, I agree completely with everything that Claire said, and I would suggest looking at Brewdog. Brewdog's a really nice example for now, because they kind of just they use terms, they just really understand their audience very, very well, and they do use terms like carbon-free beer, but they always put the context, and all of that kind of evidence and the numbers is somewhere, but it's not the message. So I hope that helps. It's basically the same logic. Like, if you understand why you want to say it, and what you're trying to achieve by sharing this number, you might realize you don't need to. If you really understand your audience, you know, if you're communicating with sustainability professionals or people who understand it, or clients who understand it, like retailers, then it's worth doing. But if your audience is the general public, it just doesn't mean much unless, like Claire said, you put that kind of the story and the context around it. So this is where we got onto the guinea pigs, which I'm really, really grateful for those people who kind of stepped up and let me have a little dig around what they were doing. So we'll look at how some of you are doing it right now. So first up, we have Roythorn Solicitors, and it's really clear that there is loads going on. You guys take your environmental commitment really seriously. That definitely comes over, but it does feel like an add-on. Your sort of sustainability journey is a bit of an aside from the day-to-day, sort of neatly put in a box over here. That's how it felt, kind of at a surface glance at what you're doing. There were glimmers of storytelling. So you started talking about how this was driven by your staff. That was really interesting. And where you started to talk about storytelling, that was really powerful. But I think the extent of your effort doesn't always come across because you're often talking about the what and the how rather than the why and the bigger vision. And I think you could go further. So you've got this commitment to becoming one of the UK's most sustainable legal firms. Why not the most sustainable? Like, you're doing lots, and this is obviously something that you're, you know, driven by staff you take very seriously, and you do various initiatives around it. I think you could be bolder in that vision and really tie it back to the core of the company. It feels like you are a nanosecond away from being a much more purpose-driven organisation, and perhaps you are on the inside, but that is not what's coming across externally. It's kind of purpose is over here. I feel like you should be brave and take it a step further so that it's really driving and feels much more stick of rock, because you've got it all there. You've got the kind of the meat content, the sausage is all there. You're lacking sizzle around it. I need to find a sort of vegan version of that metaphor for these types of talks, but you've got sausage and you're lacking sizzle. Small World Vet Centre, I loved what you were doing. I really liked it. It's not always glossy, but it works because you're not just telling me that you care, you're really showing me. And you use stories very effectively. It felt honest and authentic and really went to the heart of what you do. It was clear that it was a passion and it was built into what you were trying to do. The kind of support of the natural world is so important. And I think I would push you further. You're kind of limited by you know, what you can do with your website. I think your social media feeds felt much more exciting. And I think you could go further on your website because your proof points were a little bit light when we got to that point. You know, where is the kind of the evidence for some of the bigger stuff? All the claims you made were evidence, but I think you could go further. I don't know what stage you're at of your kind of sustainability journey, but I really liked so much of what you were doing, and I found it really engaging, and it felt very stick of rock. But I think you could afford to, yeah, go further and kind of get those the bigger stuff backed up. Leader. So you are a purpose-driven organisation. So I've been a bit harsher on you in my feedback because you could do more. This sustainability is not a kind of a side dish for you. It is absolutely at the core of what you believe and why you exist. And with that in mind, I just want to see more, because beyond transport, it's really not clear what you're doing. It's kind of all there, but you make people work really hard to find it. So your kind of mission and the change you want to see in your world is there, because that goes to your work. But as an organisation, what you're doing yourselves beyond kind of sustainable transport, I expect you're doing loads, but it doesn't come across. And when it does, it didn't feel like it was told in a kind of a narrative. It was just kind of lots of information. Hello, Claire.
Not a specific question, but just Leda is one of the members that I work, and just to confirm your suspicions, they're absolutely fantastic. They're doing amazing things. You know, they've got alternative heat that they're powering using local sustainable wood. They've even looked at, you know, sustainability of biscuits and plant milks, and you know, they are really looking at this stuff in really fine detail. So yes, they're doing it all, but you're right, perhaps that communication is not coming across.
I would definitely say that, and I think it's so much easier if this really goes to the core of what you do and how you exist. It's easier to do. So you've got no excuse, basically. You know, the stuff that Claire said, you're making people work quite hard to get to that, kind of in terms of your at a glance external communications. The sustainable transport stuff was there, but the rest was missing. University of Manchester, there is a lot going on, a lot. It's obviously a core strategic goal, and that comes across loud and clear. But for a visitor, it's actually too much to get on top of. There is so much information in different areas, and I suspect it's too much for you to keep on top of as well, because if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's this kind of not found. So a lot of the information you've got there, when you actually try and go through to it, it's not found. And I think that's just, you're sort of a victim of your own success. There's just too much information. So in terms of somebody cold coming to it at a glance, it's just a bit overwhelming, and you just get this overall sense that there's a lot of stuff going on, but it doesn't tell me a story. And my overriding feeling was that despite all the headway, and you can't deny the headway, I mean, the kind of external validation for what you're doing is so strong, but the leadership was lacking. You were kind of just dancing to other people's tunes. We're doing this in terms of sustainable development goals. We're doing this in terms of this accreditation. We've won this. But where was that vision for what you want to do in the world, the vision for the change you want to see? And that is what young people want more than anything. Again, it's not this kind of do no harm, it's the do positive. And there was an amazing video on there that kind of backed up some of the stuff that you've been doing and how you were ticking off the sustainable development goals. But it wasn't prefaced with this is the goal, this is the direction of travel. We're not just rated the best university, we are driving what good looks like. And I just felt like that was a real missed opportunity, given that you've made so much headway already. It was a shame that you were just sort of following what felt like you were told to do, rather than really driving the change above and beyond that and setting out for universities in the UK what good looks like. And then learner. So really, really nice in a nutshell line. This whole, we're dedicated to empowering professionals all over the planet, but not at the expense of the planet. Really nice in a nutshell kind of line that gives you a nice narrative hook. And good attempt at using your IIE accreditation to kind of show what you're doing, but actually to people coming to it cold, it doesn't mean anything. So the kind of line on your header banner that says we've joined the IIE scheme, that doesn't mean anything. And I would remember that your IIE accreditation is how you back up your claims. It's central to your comms because it's your external validation, but it's not the message. So I would flip that and remove your proof point from your prime real estate on your website and have a narrative, a message there instead, and reverse that. So when people click through, they can then see, oh, it's not just them saying it, it's IIE, they're IIE accredited. Yeah, I'm just checking I've covered everything, but the bit that resonates with the people that visit you will be the vision and the commitment. And actually in your social feeds, that came across kind of much more strongly. You were using storytelling. I think it's just your header banner on your website is the first thing people see. And if that doesn't make much sense, then it's a real waste of that kind of prime real estate. I think that might be my last slide. And I feel like I've talked at you for ages, but hopefully there was some useful stuff. And if there are any other questions, either yell now or feel free to follow up.
There's a few more questions. I thought I would wait and then once you were through the case studies. So I'll just read them out to you in a second. Okay. So good question. Does linking work/vision to SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals, make them more recognisable and powerful across the board? I'm just going to add that we had a really interesting presentation at our IIE Awards about SDGs and linking CSR activities with SDGs, so worth watching that as well, but I'm sure Nairi will have some insight for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that Manchester did a lot of. Everything was kind of set out in terms of this is the headway that we're making when it comes to the SDGs. And I think it is powerful, but I would remember that that is your evidence base, your proof points, a kind of framework. It's not a story that is going to resonate with people because there's loads of them and you can meet them in various different ways. So I think you need to have your kind of your why, your really strong vision for the change you want to see front and centre, and then by all means kind of use that as a framework to show what you're doing, but it's not the thing that is going to make your communications hugely more impactful. It's a proof point rather than the narrative that makes people sit up and listen.
Okay, and then we've got another question. Hi everyone, we recently joined IIE. We haven't fully figured out what this journey will mean for us, and we understand this is part of the process, especially as a small business. You said we can communicate our direction of travel. When we announce that we are working towards our first accreditation, do you have any pitfalls to point out that we should be aware of? Can we launch the start of our journey with confidence?
I suppose the pitfall that strikes me immediately is communicating that you're starting your accreditation, because although that's important, it's really dull. It goes to, sorry Claire, you can boot me off at any time. It might be the message that you want to get across. I really doubt it's the message your audience is up for hearing. So I would urge you to find a different way of explaining it. The fact that you're going for the accreditation is proof of what you're saying. It gives you the right to say we're doing this because it's external validation, commitment, it's all of those things. In and of itself, is it interesting? I don't think so. I think it's much more interesting why you've decided that now is the right moment, what this is going to mean for the organisation. And then the backup point to that is, and we're going to do it properly. And this is how we're committing to doing it properly because we're part of this external framework. So I think the biggest pitfall you could do is have a press release that says so-and-so starts accreditation. I would flip it, tell your story, and then your kind of proof is your IIE accreditation. It's really important, but it's not the most important thing to lead with. That's the first thing that came into my head, but if other things strike me, I'll let Claire know later.
Well, I think we're actually fairly near the end of the session now, with almost impeccable timing. We've got about 6 minutes left, so I think I'm going to wrap it up. There's no further questions that I can see, but if you do have any questions that occur to you after this event, please do feel free to email us. I think Nairi left her details as well, so you'll be able to see those. So feel free to email either IIE or Nairi directly, and we will do our best to get those questions answered. So all that remains for me to be said is, firstly, thank you so much for coming along, Nairi. Thank you so much to all the attendees that came. I really hope that was useful for you and that you can go forth and apply that knowledge now to improving your communications. I just wanted to let you know that the next webinar in this series of webinars is going to be 17th of June, same sort of time, 10 to 11 AM. That's going to be about the basics of carbon footprinting. It is going to be members only, mainly because this one is going to be talking through the IIE tool for calculating your carbon footprint, which obviously non-members would not have access to. We're going to be talking not only about calculating the business footprint in terms of the building and offices, but we're also going to be talking a bit about how to start estimating emissions associated with staff working from home, because that is such a big part of the way businesses are doing business now, with so many people working from home. So it's an important part of your carbon footprint that often is not being captured. You know, I'm auditing people and they're absolutely smashing their targets in terms of reductions in energy, transport, etc. But it's not the full picture. So it's just trying to incorporate that full picture of your carbon footprint. And we also have a tool that can be used for that. So once again, thank you so much to everybody for attending. And I hope to see you again for one of our sessions in the near future. And I'm going to close the session.